was right before I, and then came back to a different kind of unstable. So anyway, I leave on Tuesday, and unfortunately, the meeting time for this group, my other groups I can more or less still do when I'm in Asia, but this is basically midnight in Asia on Sunday, and so I'll be able to meet with you guys for the 4+ weeks that I'll be gone. But after that, mid June, I'll be fairly here until I come out to you guys to do the medicine with the retreat. So I'm looking forward to that. So where
Where
are
are
you?
you going?
Malaysia.
So I wanted to ask you something. In that article in whatever it was, that Buddhist thing.
Buddhist thing, yes.
Yeah. Well, anyway, they called you a lama.
Yes.
Can we call you a lama?
I am a lama, and but I don't usually go by that. It's sort of like Khenpo Rinpoche is a lama, and his title is Khenpo. I'm a lama. My title is Doja Lopen. Then there are some lamas whose title are Khenpo. There are some lamas whose title is Drupan. I was just explaining to someone who asking the question you asked. And it's all very esoteric, I'm sure. Kempo and Drupal and Geshe are much more commonly encountered in terms of what kind of lama are you. In that it's quite possible for a monastery to have a number of Kempos, a number of Drupans, and including a number of Lopan. But each monastery, if it is big enough a monastery, at most will have only one Dorje Lopen. And so that title is a little rare that you would encounter. And so it's rarely seen. So like, for example, in the Shambhala system, there's one Dorje Lopen, which is kind of, I guess, that system is second to the head of the organization. So yeah, and so Lions Roar recently, when they published that, they said, what should we use? The Doja Open or the Lama? I said, it doesn't matter. Whatever you think people would understand what you're saying. So they went in the direction of just using the Lama. Yeah. There is this idea floated around a while back that lamas are titles given to people who have finished 3-year retreat, but that's not at all the case. I mean, in the broader sense, anyone wearing robes are called lama. If you walk around in Kathmandu, when in doubt, see someone in robes, you don't know who they are. Out of politeness, you go, Lama, how are you? In a way, it's the lowest common denominator. Although then, spiritually speaking, the word lama is not at all lowest common denominator, because that's the guru, that's the guide with a capital G. But the way that term is used on a day-to-day basis, it is the lowest common denominator for anyone, except for, I think, in the Gelugpa lineage, they are very careful about using the word lama to just call anyone. Because like the founder of their lineage, Tsongkhapa, they affectionately call Lama Tsongkhapa, just like Lama Zopa Rinpoche. It's a very serious, so they have kept the seriousness of the word Lama. So Gelugpas generally avoid using the word Lama to refer to like any or every teacher. Then literally the word is teacher. So how do you become a Lama when you have students?
So can you give empowerments?
I think you have received empowerments from me.
No, I know I have, but I'm asking you if you do, and if you could do it when you're in Little Rock.
You mean like coming up?
Yeah.
Oh no, we don't have time for that weekend. We've done it before. We did a Manjushri, I think, at one point.
We did a Milarepa, you gave us didn't you, for that sadhana?
Yeah, that wasn't an empowerment, but the empowerment was the Manjushri, I think, that was done in the small room and limited to people in our group and not open to the public, I think. And then
I
on a regular basis at Urban Dharma, I I do that. Yeah, I mean, I can give what I have properly received, and
But I mean, you've been receiving a ton of stuff.
yeah, but mm,
Wow.
so that's the role of the Dorje Loben in particular. It's literally the Vajra master. Mm. So every monastery has a Vajra master. Then often that is distinguished from the reincarnate Lama that is associated with the monastery. So the reincarnate Lama will be the first one people would go to request empowerment in the absence of the reincarnate Lama. And some monasteries don't have reincarnate Lamas associated with them. Then the Dorje Lopen plays that role. In fact, the person giving the empowerment is by default called the Dorje Lopen, the Vajra Master. So the Vajra Master is a Vajrayana designation. So Guru Rinpoche is the Vajra master in the context of Tibet, the Dorje Lopen. So sometimes he is also affectionately called Lopen Rinpoche, to be distinguished from Lopen. So there's another monastic title called Lopen. And so it doesn't have the qualifier Dorje, which is the Vajra. So the Lopen is usually a teacher of Buddhist philosophy in the Buddhist seminary. It's like the assistant professor, whereby the Kempo is the professor. So just Lopen without the Dorje Lopen. So again, in the Shambhala system, there's all these acharyas. They are basically the Lopens. Since many people are familiar with the Shambhala system, but whatever it is left today of that system. Anyway, yeah. So where are we on Lojong in 7 points?
Well, last week we were discussing each one of our texts and how it talks about the fourth key point.
Which point are we at?
The fourth.
The fourth, okay. And those 2 lines.
Yeah, we just talked about the first one.
Okay.
What page, Melissa?
153 in our book.
Which book?
Kendall's Power of Mind.
No. I got a bunch of books.
Exactly. So when the question is what page, you'll be like, depending on which book.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So the main point in the fourth point is a summary of, like it's saying. So when you get right down to it, in terms of looking at what are you training over a whole lifetime, then it says, well, over a whole lifetime, if you want to summarize the training that we're talking about in this Lojong in 7-point training, then you can summarize it by understanding that you can distill all these instructions into into the application of the 5 powers. Yeah? So this is what this 4th point is about. So the first statement there is just tells you, right? Briefly stated, applying the 5 powers, the 5 strengths, is the quintessential of the pith instructions. So the essence of the essence are these 5 strengths, these 5 powers. Various translation for that word. Then the next line is saying, and as for when it comes to the time of dying, it is also these 5 powers, but then specific to the context of dying. So whole lifetime, now you know you're actively dying. What are these 5 strengths at the time that you're actively dying? Do that. So this is basically these 2. So the Mahayana instructions for transference are the same 5 strengths. So transference is the word that is, the Tibetan word of that is poa. So poa these days have become like almost like fixed, as that practice that I'm sure many of you have some familiarity. Is the practice of like ejecting your consciousness, transferring your consciousness from this life to the next life. But poa itself has a broader meaning. It simply means to go from one place to another place. So it's sometimes even a euphemism for dying, meaning you're going from this life to the next life. So if you didn't do anything about it, anything special to intervene, anything special to direct your destination, then you are at the mercy of the ripening of your karmic patterns. Then you will be poa'd, using it as a verb, you'll be poa'd, you'll be transferred to wherever your karmic conditioning will take you at the time of the transition between this life and the next life. But here, of course, it's saying, if you use the same 5 powers or 5 strengths that you have been training all throughout your life, then at the time of death, you can transfer, you can direct your journey onward to a positive place. Positive in terms of dharma. May not be positive in terms of being born in a powerful family, a wealthy family, a family with good-looking genes, a family with healthy genes, all of that. But to go in a direction that is good in terms of dharma, in terms of becoming free from confusion and suffering. So here, again, briefly stated, because if you look at the 4th point, right, there is a title to that point, right? A lifetime's practice in summary. The 3rd point, so in a way, it kind of stands in contrast with the 3rd point, because the 3rd point, what is the thrust of the 3rd point? How to take adversities. When bleep happens, how do you practice? So in a way, right, the 3rd point is more intense. When everything feels like, it's falling on your head, everything has turned upside down. How do you train? That's the 3rd point. So then following that, the 4th point is saying, And overall, in general, what are we training? The 5 powers, the 5 strengths. As I said, I see my contribution to the practice and the understanding of this Lojong in 7 points is paying attention to the structure of the 7 points, the respective placement of each of those points. I think it's very significant and it's very powerful when you look at them as these 7 points rather than 59 or however number of statements, if you count them and make them into, note cards. You end up with 59 or 60 plus statements. Of course, it's not wrong, but you are missing I believe, the intention of the original composition, which is they are divided into these points. They help us to bring focus to an unruly number of statements, 59. So the 5 strengths that they're talking about here, various translation for each of them. So the first one translation is the compelling power. Cultivating this compelling power or strength, then cultivating the power of familiarization or habituation, and then cultivating the strength of what's poetically called sowing or planting the white seeds, meaning the virtuous seeds. The 4th is the strength of disenchantment. And the 5th is the strength of aspirations. So these are the 5. Compelling strength, forceful, so that this strength, has a force to it, right? It's in a way you could say it's through the next strength, the familiarization strength, that then it turns into compelling. Compelling in the sense of you almost feel like you don't have a choice. You are being pushed. Often it is the afflictive emotions, is the mental defilements, right? It's often it's our bad habits that's pushing us, that's compelling us. Right? Here is saying we should cultivate this other kind of compelling force. And what is this compelling force? In the context of Lojong in 7 points is create a compelling force where you feel compelled under all circumstance to practice the 2 bodhicittas, the main practice of the Lojong in 7 points, which is given in the 2nd point, the 10 statements there. First, how to cultivate absolute or ultimate bodhicitta, the absolute or ultimate awakening mind, which pertains to wisdom. And then next, side by side, the other side of this coin, how to cultivate relative bodhicitta, which is the cultivation of love and compassion. So the first power is to rely on this power, but this power doesn't, fall from the sky. You have to cultivate, you have to build up this power. So these 5 strengths, it's not saying that it will magically turn up. It's not saying that, you can pray to someone to give you these strengths. You have to do the lifting in the gym to build up these muscles, so that you almost feel that you're compelled, right? You're compelled to never be separated from cultivating the 2 bodhicittas. So that sets, that sets the context, that sets the direction, that sets the stage. for the other four powers. Once that determination is clear, and how do we develop that kind of compulsion, that kind of determination? Again and again, look at the advantages of seeing things clearly, seeing things as they are. That's wisdom. Always be aware, frequently what we see is not what we get. Yeah. And here we're not talking about, I mean, you could think of it in terms of, like a general attitude of like, don't judge so quickly. There is some other story behind that, right? We say that what you see is not what you get. But here, more to the point of what you see is not what you get is what you see tends to reinforce fixity. What we see tend to reinforce fixity, reinforce grasping, reinforce rigidity, reinforce stubborn mind. And that's what we see. But what we get, right, so to say, what you see is not what you get. What you get, what we should try to get, which we don't get, is that all phenomena is interdependently arising. Therefore, also called empty. That nothing whatsoever is solidly unchanging. Nothing whatsoever stands on its own by its own power, but everything arises. All our experiences arises interdependently. And so when all our experiences and all our reality arises from moment to moment interdependently, there's really no ground for fixation. There's really no valid ground for grasping. But yet, we have this habit of grasping. We have this habit of fixing. And, I'm sure you all understand why this habit is so attractive, why this habit is so addictive, even if it is contrary to what is, contrary to truth, contrary to the actual situation. It's so easy, it's so addictive, it's so automatic, precisely because we are freaked out by the truth of interdependence, the truth of emptiness, the truth of change. That then we find that to help us have less fear, we should fixate. So it began as a crutch, but then the crutch takes over. Then suddenly we are trapped in a particular reality that we see no way out, on the one hand, or a particular reality that we don't want to get out. But then, of course, it's not possible because that will change. So either we find ourselves with this reality, which is really a fiction, that things are terribly falling apart and I want to keep them together, so you keep applying duct tape to tape it back together. Or the other scenario, which is things are falling apart and no amount of duct tape what can allow you what you're looking for, to try to piece everything back together constantly. So those two situations, and vacillating between the two and often combining both, is where we are, where we wander around and grope around in the dark. Some days, in our groping, we find a plush toy. Other days, there are these blades. And we go on and on, right? So we don't see. But we need to cultivate this seeing. Then we also cultivate, right, relative bodhicitta, which is this unbiased love and compassion, but unbiased love and compassion informed by the understanding that the best way to love and to care for others is to facilitate their waking up.
The what?
They are waking up.
Oh.
They are becoming Buddhas. And how is the best way to facilitate their waking up, their Buddhahood? By working on our own waking up, our own Buddhahood. But even though we're talking so much about our own, this our own has no meaning unless it's embedded within being good to others. So that's the irony, or that's the creative tension that is always there. You have to work on yourself. There's no other choice. But your working on yourself is should be informed by a genuine concern for others. So these are the ways, to strengthen this force, this power called the power of compulsion, so that over time, instead of being compelled by our negative habits and our unskillful actions, we feel more and more compelled by a commitment to actualizing the two bodhicittas. So that's the power of the compelling power, the compelling strength that we are talking about here. Perhaps you all have already read, the various commentaries on this particular power, and maybe, I'm sure if you have done that, you can contribute to this as well, based on what you have read, the particular commentary you have.
In Kendall's book, it's pretty short, a couple paragraphs on this power, but he just emphasizes the need to constantly make the vow, to vow to cultivate the two bodhicittas.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of the force of aspiration.
That's the fifth force, actually. So I'll be curious.
Sorry.
No. I'll be curious to see how he distinguishes the fifth force. So the fifth force is the power of aspiration. Maybe he has rearranged them, so you might have to look around to see where the power of the compelling power. The listing of the power might be in a different order.
No, he said it in the
last one.
Sorry?
It's the last one. It's after regret.
Yeah, first force he talks about is the propelling force.
The power of?
He calls it the propelling force.
Propelling, yeah, okay. So compelling, propelling, right. What pushes us, right? What propels us, what pushes us, yeah.
So if I could share Chogyam Trungpa's little paragraph from him.
Yeah.
He calls it strong determination. That's what he calls it. And he says strong determination is connected with developing an attitude toward your practice that is almost like falling completely in love. You would like to go to bed with of course he says that, right?
Yeah, of course.
You would like to go to bed with your lover, you long for it, You would like to wake up with your lover. You long for that too. You have a sense of appreciation and joy. Therefore, your practice does not become torture or torment. It does not become a cage. Instead, your practice becomes a way of cheering yourself up constantly. Your practice might require a certain amount of exertion, a certain amount of pushing yourself, but you are well connected. So you are pleased to wake up in the morning and you are pleased to go to bed at night. Even your sleep becomes worthwhile. You sleep in a good frame of mind. This is the last sentence. The idea is one of waking up basic goodness, the Alaya principle, and realizing that you are in the right spot, the right practice. So there is a sense of joy in strong determination, which is the first.
Right, right. So that's the propelling, that's the compulsion. So he's emphasizing, seeing it joyfully, with delight.
So it might not start out that way, right?
Probably,
But cultivating, it's like realizing, like, I mean, Lama Tenzin said to us once, if there's no joy in your practice, you're not doing it right. You know, it's not supposed to be, hard like that, yeah. But it doesn't always start out that way,
I think we start out with joy, as in a recognition, right? Like, oh, I like this, right? So it's there. Then somewhere along the way, it gets hard, which of course is going to get hard because we are going against the grain, we're swimming upstream. Having challenges doesn't mean there's no joy. I look at my friends who are into extreme sports. That's where they derive their joy from.
Yeah.
Doing really hard and extreme things, so Tibetans also kind of like that, especially they say, these Kampas in Eastern Tibet, reason why that region has produced so many great masters, statistically speaking, is because these are, very, very gutsy, passionate people. When they go in, they go all in. Nothing lukewarm, in these Kampas. So this is the propelling. So you need, this propelling force, that is pushing you in the right direction. So Trungpa maybe prefers seducing you into the right direction. But the main thrust here is, cultivate your appreciation of the two bodhicittas, so that it almost feels like, you really don't have any other choice. You are being pushed, you are being propelled, you are being compelled by this very powerful motivation. So the vow that Khentrul Rinpoche emphasized, the vow, like, why do you take the vow? You take the vow because you are so sold, right, on the benefit of actualizing these two bodhicittas. And so kind of in this order, in a way, this is the beginning. You're compelled, you are propelled, you are pushed, you are forced, even. And here really, I think it's, it's playing off of, otherwise we are propelled, compelled, pushed by kleshas. Yeah. So now, let us be pushed by, let us be seduced by, let us be forced by bodhicitta instead. Then familiarize. So again, these five, although, we live in linear time, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? But in the end, you can see that actually they are almost like 5 spokes of a wheel. You know, you're coming in from all 5 directions, and they reinforce each other. Yeah, in the actual practice, is not so much, right? That first this, then this. You know, it's not even like, oh, after you gain like 10% momentum in the first strength, then you start the second strength, you know, and build up from there. But really, it's a cohesive thing, right? So one aspect is, you know, to be propelled, to be compelled. Now, how does this power actually develop? It develops from the power of the strength of familiarization.
Habit.
Habit, yeah. Train again and again, you know, in these 2 bodhicittas. And the more you train in the 2 bodhicittas, train meaning habit, habituating. The more you habituate the 2 bodhicittas, then the more the 2 bodhicittas will become a compelling force. So the second power, the second strength, the second force is emphasizing the need to familiarize, the need to habituate. If you don't do that, you know, it will go away. If you don't do that, then you will habituate something else. Yeah? The habituation never goes away. What to habituate? That's where the difference between samsara and nirvana. So we're either habituating the causes of suffering, or we're habituating the causes of happiness. There's no third choice. There's a third scenario in a sense, as in it's a mix of both things. So where we are now is, yes, mainly a mix of 2. So we need to move in the direction of more and more of one and less of the other. Habituating habits of happiness. Stay away from forming a habit around unskillful actions. And therefore, the third power is to be sure that we only create the causes of happiness. So accumulate merit. Here is particularly like making offerings. When you have something good, you think, oh, I'm offering it to the 3 jewels. I'm offering it to the goal of Buddhahood. So you walk around in Whole Foods, you know, you see all the abundance. You mentally take all of them and you offer. That's how merit is accumulated. You walk around the neighborhood now in the spring, you see all the flowers blooming, all the green coming out. You mentally take all of that and you offer. You go to a restaurant, you know, take a few moments to take in all the enjoyment that is going on, you know, and you offer that enjoyment. You like to watch football or basketball, you know, or baseball. Take a moment and to offer that enjoyment. And in that way, then we keep sowing what's here called, very literally, these white seeds.
So I have a practical question.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I'm old, and a lot of my friends are going through the same thing.
Yes.
And that is, you know, it's just harder to keep my friends as I get older. And I have a friend that I've had forever that I love, love, love. She's not a Buddhist, she's an AA. But she's getting older. She's 80, and she's just become her name is Judy. And so to myself, I call her Judge Judy.
Mm-hmm.
and she's just really bad, and it seems to be getting worse, and I don't want to not have any friends, even though, I mean, I have, I have my whole AA group and you guys. But the thing of it is, I got off of a messenger that had her and another friend. There were, I mean, they were just talking all the time, talking about themselves, what they were doing, all their problems, everything. And it was starting to really wear me out. I mean, like every little move, like, oh, I'll pick you up at a meeting, where we're going to go to lunch. Blah, blah, blah. So I mean, I finally got off of there, and I feel a little peace. It was just it was overwhelmed. It was way too much for me, because I mean, my job takes up a lot of energy.
So there's the next power, the power of disenchantment.
Yeah. I mean, it hurts. It hurts. It really does. But I just know that that's kind of a process that happens, that maybe we get a little pickier, and, we're just.
It's probably true. Yes, we're getting more and more set in our ways. So we want to ensure that the disenchantment that we're talking about is it may begin as annoyance and like and feeling like, it's not worth it. I'm not going to put up with, right? But we can skillfully from there. So this is I think this is the skillful means here. It often begins like this, because we're set in our ways, and you're like, you know what, I don't want to put up with this anymore, right? But we can from there turn it more to, right? It began, I think, in a way, it began in an unskillful state of mind, which is, it is about self-cherishing. So it's okay. Of course, we all do that. We're not Buddhists yet. But from there, we can then turn it in the direction of, okay, but now I should look deeper into this to understand that the way I feel, why I feel this way is my mind can still be better trained. And so continuing to relate to people around me, the whole life I've been relating to them, is not going to significantly change anything. So then to give rise to real disenchantment or renunciation. Real renunciation is not based on disappointment, it's not based on like aversion, Although a lot of times renunciation comes to us at the beginning in one of those forms. Because we desire something we cannot get, then we become disappointed. Because we are stuck with what we don't want, so we become resentful. Renunciation often arises, first step in those contexts. If we can then move it in the direction of, whether it's because of resentment or because of disappointment, the more basic point is, I've been relating to my relationships, my job, my whatever, my kids, my family, all in this kind of, in this mode, in this context that is all based on just attachment and aversion. Now is the time to be determined. Like, I want to get out of this trap of attachment and aversion. So it may or may not mean not doing that much anymore with them, but it's not out of aversion anymore. It's saying, we're all in the same boat. For 30 years, I've been in the same boat. If I continue to be in the same boat, I'll be a mess when the day comes. I'm not helping them, I'm not helping me. So then now, taking the step of self-care, on the surface, it might look, selfish, but not if you understand, only when I truly now focus on self-care will I be able to care for others. And let these others be whoever others turn up, Maybe new friends, maybe new contacts, don't know. But don't let new friends, new contacts be a repeat of the old, which is where we came from,
Yeah, I have that all over my forehead.
Yeah.
Come and whatever.
Yeah.
But it's really it's so true. If you want to see if it's an attachment, as high as the attachment is, when it's over, however low it goes is proportional.
Yep.
If you're sick for a month because you lose a friend, there's some attachment in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have, like I'm getting ready to go back to Malaysia. Of course, some of my cousins, they're telling me about, they saw my folks and, and they're saying, oh, your mom looks really exhausted, or, I said, yeah, there are good days, there are bad days. I said, this is, some of my mom's friends and some of my aunts and uncles, they have already lost their partner 20 years ago and now they are alone, And then in my mom and dad's case, they're aging together, And I said, I don't know anything about being together with someone, but just observing that, you can see, on a good day, things are really good. On a bad day, the two sets of afflictive emotions turn into 4 sets of suffering. It's exponential. It's not a judgment, it's just a description of what happens, So on a good day, them aging together, yeah, maybe exponential 4 sets of good, but also 4 sets of, difficulties, 4 sets of resentments, 4 sets of disappointment. And so this up and down and up and down.
Dr. Lye,
Yes.
when you say 2 sets, are you talking about attachments and aversion?
No, mom and dad.
Oh, okay.
And don't say 2 twins. People used to,
So
I read that the other day.
yeah, so mom and dad, right? If they were alone, which they're not, at some point one of them will be. But if so, their friends, our relatives who have lost their partner, much earlier, and they're alone. When you're alone, you enjoy your one set of happiness in one moment and one set of disappointment in another moment, But when you have 2 people involved, it's not just 2, it's exponential, it's at least 4. And I'm not saying it's a given. And if you don't have perspective, if you don't have dharma, when the 4 turns up, it's a big deal. And when you lose the 4, right? It's always turning up and losing. So the 4 that turns up that you don't like, then it's a big deal. And the 4 that you like now is going away. It's also a big deal. Whereas if you're only one person, one is mostly just one. Of course, we too have immense capacity, lacking perspective, to multiply 1 into infinity, of course. So bottom line is need to have perspective. That's another word for talking about wisdom. Sometimes we use wisdom. Wisdom is so mysterious.
Yeah, that relationship thing blows my mind. Then I think I'm over this thought was, well, because I can still be loving towards her. That doesn't mean I have to be,
Yeah.
I can keep the love going.
Mm-hmm.
Because it used to be, well, I thought that I had to stay in that. Well, I don't know what I thought, but anyway, I don't think that anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, I think more and more I could see that you lose interest in things, and
Right.
again, there is the autopilot losing interest in doing so many things, and if we don't actually transform that, then that is just part of samsara. That is, attachment, aversion, losing interest. So again, my point is like naturally a losing of interest because physical strength is no more there, mental strength is no more there, right? At least no more than the way that it used to be, right? But that's just samsara running its own course. So that's not yet a virtue. That's not yet a good, way to handle. A good, what we call a Lojong way to handle is seeing that the body is getting weaker and therefore the mind has less interest in things. Don't let it just remain like that. Let it become a condition for really giving rise to renunciation based on understanding. See how I used to be so interested, so energetic, wanting to do this, wanting to do that, but now I barely want to leave the house. The fact of barely wanting to leave the house doesn't mean you don't have attachment, So but the fact of barely wanting to leave the house, if you can turn that into actual renunciation, like based on understanding. Oh, see, what was so enjoyable is no longer. This is the nature of things. This is just how it is. And I deludedly thought, my previous self is the true me. But this is just how it is. Right? Then there's insight, Then even as you go into, less and less interested, even as you maybe, karmic things are such that you suffer dementia, even that, there can be a layer of wisdom, even in the midst of dementia. There's a layer of wisdom in recognizing that's just how it is. The brain now is shooting in chemicals in the wrong direction. That's the nature of change.
That's interesting. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so the fourth is the power of renunciation. So Karen's question, got it already talking about that. Now, again, I think this text is very amazing in its ability, its way of contrasting and balancing. So you don't want disenchantment or renunciation, to go the wrong direction, that it becomes giving up and resentment or disappointment. And so how do you navigate away from that mistake? The fifth power, the power of aspiration. So you, from time to time, you touch base with the vast view of what is possible. Even if right now, you and my body is slowing down, mind is slowing down, even cannot remember things, right? It doesn't mean power of aspirations is not possible, because now our aspirations is not based on our kind of like misguided confidence in a youthful body, a sharp mind, all of that. Aspirations goes beyond that. Right? So when you have enough presence of mind, to Read Samantabhadra's aspiration of vast noble deeds, May I purify an ocean of karma. May I develop an ocean of Buddha qualities. Those are the aspirations, right? And then like in the next moment, right? Or later that day, you say, I cannot even remember what I did this morning, for example, right? You don't become frustrated, you're just like, well, you know, well, of course you could take, supplements and all that to prevent all of that but you don't get shaken so easily. So now you make aspirations, even as your body and mind is failing. But the power of aspirations don't fail. Power of aspiration, strength of aspiration is about vastness of mind. Yeah, it's not like daydreaming. It's not like hopeful thinking, wishful thinking, right? No. And what's the difference? Wishful thinking is like thinking, because I made this, tomorrow it will change. What I want will turn up, No, that's wishful thinking. Aspiration is continue to let your mind, your capacity, your reference point, continuously reminding ourselves it can be more and more vast. It can be more and more vast. And what that does is it creates so much space that good or bad that turns up, we can allow it to be there because it's not going to consume us. That's the problem with good or bad turning up, or particularly good or particularly bad turning up, because it tends to consume us. And it consumes us because there's no perspective, there's no space. Power of aspirations is to keep, extending and expanding the space. Expanding and extending our capacity that is not based on these little temporary strength and weaknesses that we have. It goes beyond all of that. So these are the 5 powers, the 5 strengths. And again, all the various commentaries, I'm sure they have more to offer. You can read the various commentaries and further enhance. Yeah, the next is about the 5 powers applied during the time of dying. And then there's this peculiar, expression that says, in the translation that I use, it says, practicing them is important. And another translation, it says, conduct is essential. So what it's saying there is like, don't just let this be, practice, or translated as practice, or translated as conduct, right? What it's talking about is this. It has a more particular meaning, right? Than just like generally practice. It has a connotation of don't dismiss skillful means. In other words, don't dismiss ritual. Would be one context of what conduct refers to, what we would call ritual. Don't dismiss the power of relying on, like, for example, what do we mean? Like, at the time of dying, it is good to have your body in the south-north kind of plexus, with your face facing towards, the west, for example. Like skillful means of that sort, conduct of that sort. As you're dying, it is good to be in an environment where it's not causing you anxiety but relaxing. So even though from the ultimate position we know this, and that, but then don't ignore conduct. Don't ignore the helpful, skillful nuts and bolts that we can rely on. Such as the liberation upon seeing, liberation upon touch, and those are all pertaining to conduct, pertaining to practice, pertaining to method. So general method, it talks about how you should lay down on your right side. Yeah? And there, under there, it actually talked about so specifically like the sowing of the white seeds, the creating of merit, the making of offerings. So it says now the conduct is important, meaning doing it is really important. Now, all the things that you own, you cannot take them with you. You start giving them away. Before you end up feeling like it has been snatched away from you, you start giving them away. So in that sense, conduct is really important. So good. I think I'm going to run now to the next thing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Be ready to take off on Tuesday.
Yes, have a wonderful trip.
We wish you safe travels.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go up to DC on Tuesday afternoon and fly out of DC on Wednesday morning. Yeah. Okay. Ta-ta, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Steve.